for everything paranormal. Paranormal.
Throughout the ages, history has been altered by word of mouth and the misrepresentation of those who might not have been present when some of the world's most significant events took place. Channelers Barry and Connie Strohm bring through the spirits of those who actually witnessed or took part in these historical events and lets them tell their stories in their own words. Welcome to Channeling History. And now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to Channeling History. By now you should know we're the only show where all of our guests have passed and are on the other side of the life veil. Our show is brought to you every Sunday night on the Parax Radio Network. I'm Barry Strohm, your host, and I'll be doing the channeling of our spirit guests tonight.
And I'm Connie Strohm, your co-host. I will be asking the questions this evening, as usual. Next week, we'll be bringing you the spirits of Supreme Court Justices Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. They were complete opposites in their interpretation of the Constitution, but still the best of friends. Tonight, we'll be speaking with the spirit of Mr. Fred Rogers. His children's show, Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, on PBS ran from 1968 to 2001. I think you'll find he was truly one of the good guys.
Yeah, indeed. Now, we never know in advance what our spirit guests are going to say, so it's always prudent to include a disclaimer. The opinions or statements voiced on our show are the channeled words of the spirits and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Parax Network, ourselves, or our sponsors.
And all of our shows are available on our YouTube channel in the name of Barry Strohm, or if you'd like to download them, go to Podomatic.com and just search Channeling History. I would like to thank all of you that take the time to listen to our show and even join us in the chat room. I know some of you do quite a bit of research for the questions that you come up with. Your questions are always appreciated. Please tell your friends about us so we can continue to grow our audience.
Now, before we channel, we always say a prayer of protection. Now, this prayer was given to us by the spirit guides when we first began to communicate with the other side. So Connie's going to say the prayer, and we'll begin to channel with Mr. Rogers.
God, please grant us your wisdom and protection. Grant us the knowledge that we can handle and keep us safe from all things that will harm us. Keep the messages positive and pure love. Keep us safe from our egos. We ask these things in the light of the seen, the unseen, and the honesty of God.
Okay, Connie, I've been waiting for this. I was amazed how strong Fred's energy was when I was making up the questions, so let's get started.
Okay, Fred, welcome to our show. We're very happy to have you. Would you like to begin with a message?
Yes, I would like to begin with a nice message. All my life, I tried to dedicate myself to serving God and to serving children. I always felt that children were so very, very important. They were the people that would grow up to be adults, and I felt that I should try to give them understanding, that I should try to show them the way of good. I tried to show them to love, and I kept telling them, I would love to have you to be my neighbor, no matter what your color, no matter about your disability, no matter about your language. I felt that if I could have all of the children truly understanding that love is the most important thing in their lives, then all would be well. I see now that maybe I could have done a better job. There are many, many out there that are doing nothing but showing hatred. But I did my best. I tried very hard. I devoted my life to it. And I guess that I did get some good results. So, Connie, let's get on with the rest of the messages. or questions.
Okay. What would you tell us about reincarnation? And please tell us about your prior life.
I would tell you that reincarnation is absolute. If you are walking the earth today, you've walked in another life prior to it. It takes incarnate lifetimes for you to advance in the realms of heaven. Now, you asked me about my prior life, and I had many lifetimes where I served our Lord. I served God on many planets and in multiple lifetimes. But I think the most important life that I served was while Jesus was walking the earth. I lived a life of service with him, and I will never forget him. And I think that is why I was so anxious to come back and speak with the children.
And we're so glad you did. Will you tell us about your parents and the effect they had upon you?
We grew up in a wealthy neighborhood in western Pennsylvania. They had the ability to basically give me anything that I wanted, and they did. My parents were wonderful people. They were God-loving. They tried to do good to others, and they tried their best to raise me.
How did your childhood illnesses affect your life?
I was very sickly as a child. It seemed as though I picked up almost anything that could be caught. I had to spend a lot of time by myself. Being sickly is not easy. I had to play with imaginary friends, and I did a lot of things. I drew inward. I found it very hard after a while to be with other children. It was something I had to fight, and because of my sickness, I could not exercise much, so I gained more weight than I should have had. It was actually, I would say that my childhood was not as happy as it could have been in spite of what my parents attempted to do. But I think it was the fact that I had an unhappy childhood that made me want to help others and to show other children that their childhood should be a time of wonder, a time of love, and a time of learning.
Yeah. Could you describe the relationship that you had with some of the children? I mean, did you have any relationships with other children?
Yes, but they were not happy ones. I was overweight, so I was the subject of jokes and some bullying. I never could really participate in their games with them. I did not have great physical abilities in sports. Football and baseball were beyond my reach. Bullying was very hurtful. And throughout all of my shows, I attempted to show the children that bullying was a terrible thing. That is why I wanted them to show love instead of picking on the other children that might not have been as fortunate as they were.
After you had a family of your own, you taught your family to never show anger. How is that possible, especially in a world like today?
It's very difficult. I always tried not to show anger towards my family, and I was pretty successful at it. Now, as children grow up, they will be children. Brothers and sisters fight. There are many things that you try to affect, but you have little control over. Every time my children would show anger, I would tell them that it would be much better if they showed love, and If they were going to be happy, they needed to get along. In most instances, it's worked. I will admit there was times that I was pushed over the edge, that I showed much more anger than I wanted to. But I think if families today would stop children when they are angry with their brothers or their sisters, children need to understand that anger is like a disease. It can overtake your body and it can take control of your life. There are no antibiotics that will affect anger. It has to be done mentally. It has to be done through guidance, and it has to be done through loving parents or family or whoever is raising the child. It is possible to control anger in children. I don't think it's possible to totally avoid children showing anger, but they need to be told that they're doing wrong when they do it. Many parents just simply give in when a child shows anger. Instead of giving in, they have to explain the damage that anger is causing, both to the emotions of the parent and to the emotions of the child itself. If a child realizes that it can obtain its goals through showing more anger, then guess what? It will certainly show more anger. It's a difficult path, but parents have got to show children that anger is a terrible thing and that they have to show love and get along with their siblings, their parents, or the other children in school.
What made you decide to seek a career in television?
I came home from college one time, and my parents had one of the very first televisions. I looked at it, and I thought to myself that this could be an incredible tool. If people would put shows on television that would be kind, that would show love to children, I felt that it could be a huge influence. Radio had been in existence for quite a while, and it was a powerful tool. But as soon as I saw television, I figured that it would be a much more powerful medium, that people would enjoy seeing the person instead of just hearing their voice. I felt that television could be used to show emotion. The emotion I wanted it to show was kindness and understanding. I always tried to use television to show love and understanding. During the early days of television, there was much slapstick. People would hit people with pies. There was a lot of wrestling. There was a lot of shows that I felt children should not emulate. I knew from the time I saw that television set, and it's probably because my guides were telling me, but I knew that it was something I wanted to become involved with and that I wanted to use for good.
What inspired you to use all those puppets on your show?
When I was alone by myself, I started to develop puppets. They were individuals that would not bully me, that would not look at me wrong. I could actually have them speak and say the words that I wanted them to speak. A puppet will never show anger unless you show it how to and use your voice to do it. I found that puppets were something that I really enjoyed, and I found that puppets were something that could be used to bring joy to children.
Yes, and let me put in there, I was absolutely astounded at all the different voices that you had for each different puppet. You were amazing. Did you write all your own scripts?
I tried to, yes. It was a very difficult task. Sometimes my wife would help me, and there were times that I had a few individuals that would help with my scripts. But I always knew what I wanted to say. I wanted to attack difficult subjects for the children. I wanted them to know that life was not always peaches and cream. I talked to them about terrible instances that took place. 9/11 was terrible. I talked to them about that. I talked to them about death. I tried to have them understand death as a natural occurrence and in a gentle way. I understood that death was the beginning, but it's impossible for a child to understand that. Grief for a child is an extremely difficult emotion. While it can be almost overwhelming for an adult, it can be even more so for a child because they don't have the experience or the background to understand the grief that is tearing them apart when they lose a family member. I always thought that you had to speak to children like small adults. They deserved to know the truth, and they needed to be able to understand what was happening around them.
You graduated with a degree in musical composition in 1951. Then in 1962, you earned a divinity degree and became an ordained Presbyterian minister. What happened to have you return to college and become the ordained minister?
I'd always had a deep faith in God. I thought that if I studied, if I learned the Gospels, and if I went through the process of learning as much as I could about the teachings of God, then I would be better able to pass on those teachings to children in a manner in which they would understand. You see, learning, understanding, knowing the intent of God, that is something that you have to study and learn. You're not born with it. It is something that you have to use your free will to absorb. I knew that I did not want to stand in front of a congregation and preach, but I also knew that I wanted to dedicate my life to helping children. I guess that my guides knew what they were doing. I never flaunted the fact that I was ordained, but I relied heavily on the information that I learned in the inordation.
Why didn't you ever mention on your show that you were an ordained minister?
I thought that I wanted to appeal to children of all faiths. As soon as I told them or made it public that I was a Presbyterian minister, then I would offend Jewish families. I would possibly offend Catholic families. I would offend people that were not members of that religion. I wanted to speak to all children. I wanted to speak to the rich children, the poor. I wanted them to know that they were loved no matter what their religion was. That is why I tried to keep the fact that I was an ordained minister, knowledge that my family was aware of only.
You thought right. Why did you select Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood as the name for your show?
Children have the ability to understand the word neighborhood. All of them were growing up in neighborhoods. It was a universal word. Now, people would use Spanish or French or whatever to describe the neighborhood. But the neighborhood was a concept that all children could be aware of and understand. I wanted them to get along with all of the other children in their neighborhood. It seemed to me that it was a logical name for the show because it was a name that all of the children could understand.
Why did you always put on a cardigan sweater at the beginning of the show?
I wanted the children to feel at ease. I wanted them to know that it was a place that they could relax. I felt that if I came out in a coat and a tie, that they would not be relaxed. I wanted them to think that I was a member of their neighborhood. I wanted them to know that I was not going to represent any type of a threat to them.
At the beginning of the show, you would always feed the fish. What was the reason behind that?
Fish are very relaxing. Children love to watch fish. I felt that if I did something like that it would set the children at ease. I felt that if I did something that would put them at ease, they would feel like they were living in their own neighborhood when they listened to the show.
Could you tell us about your wife, Joanne?
Joanne was a wonderful and supportive person. We had life together several times before, and she was exactly what I needed for support throughout my life. She was a wonderful mother for our children. She was a wonderful support for me. Keep in mind that it is not easy to do a show so many days in a row, to do the scripting. She would contribute ideas. She would contribute understanding for what I was trying to do. She was truly a light worker in her own way. Her support was something that was invaluable to me.
Could you tell our listeners how you took the stand for racial equality on the show?
I was very disturbed by the fact that racial inequality was tearing the country apart. Keep in mind that it was a time that there was much violence between the races. It was a time that black people were not allowed to swim in the same pools as whites. I wanted the children to understand in a very, very calm way that we're all together in this, that there is no difference, that we are all created equal, and that you should love everyone regardless of their skin color. Because of the fact that many of the swimming pools were segregated, I had a wonderful individual that played a lawmaker, a policeman, and his skin was black. So one day I invited him to take his shoes off and soak his feet in a child's pool with me. It was very symbolic, but it was something that the children could understand. I sat with him. I treated him as a close friend. I treated him somebody that I loved, because I did. I always thought that children could understand equality if it was shown to them in a mild and interesting manner. The child's pool was something they could understand. The hatred that people had towards blacks was something that I did not want them to understand.
Okay, we have an interesting question from one of our listeners. That he recently watched your episode with Margaret Hamilton. So he'd like to know, who were some of your favorite guests?
I think that Margaret was a good guest. I had many people come on through the years. There were many wonderful people that came to the show. I would truly have a very difficult time telling you who the wonderful guests were, because I loved all of them. I certainly would not want to differentiate any of them. I see many of them now over here on this side. And to me, they were just simply part of the great equality that made our show what it was.
You said that television had the ability to build a community from this whole country. Has television failed?
In many ways, television has certainly failed. Today, people are inundated with violence, with hatred. There are so-called comedy shows based on violence. The children's shows today are not what I consider actually suitable for children. Many of the cartoons show nothing but violence. Many of the cartoons would help lead the children away from faith, away from God, away from His teachings. Television today has become nothing but a medium for individuals to make great wealth. The individuals that own these stations, in many instances, will give information that is not true. They use television today to influence people. In many instances, I would think that it's probably even a propaganda medium. Power and wealth has become the idols of many that hold the key to the television that you watch. Sadly, I think that television is failing. It still has incredible potential for leading people to where they should be. But the desire for wealth, hatred towards others, this is truly what you're seeing on television today.
Sadly. Why did you never appear on the set of Make Believe?
I wanted the children to consider myself a real person, an individual that gave good advice, an individual that loved them. Had I gone on to the side of Make Believe, I think that they would have associated me perhaps with cartoon characters or with subjects that they wouldn't have faith in. I never wanted them to doubt the reality of my message and the realities of the words that I spoke to them.
Your theology was love your neighbor and love yourself. Will you explain?
If you don't love yourself, it's very difficult to love your neighbor. If you don't love yourself, you're suffering from depression. It leads to anger, leads to hatred, leads to many things. Every child is an individual that should be loved for what that child is. There are many children with great problems, but they still need to be loved. Children with autism should be loved the same as people that do not have the illness. Today, it is very easy to look at those that do not have as much, those that are in a wheelchair, those that are crippled, those that have problems learning. Each child should be loved for the spark of God that is within them. All children should truly be understood and created equal. All right, let's take a short break here. We will be back in a couple minutes, and we are going to have more of this wonderful conversation with Mr. Rogers.
Don't go away. Channeling History will return right after these brief messages.
In order for the light to shine so brightly, the darkness must be present. Tune in every Monday at 10 o'clock. The Dark Sun Rising on the Para-X Radio Network.
Hi, this is Marla Brooks from Stirring the Cauldron. Thursdays are a great night on the Para-X Radio Network. We start off the evening with Journey into the Light, Chapter 3, with your hosts, Psychic Little T and Tabby Cat Gash at 7 p.m. Eastern. Then, on the first and third Thursdays of the month at 8 p.m., it's Tango and Friends, hosted by Bruce Tango. And on the alternate Thursdays at 8 p.m., tune in to Stirring the Cauldron, the Archive podcast. Every week at 9 p.m. Eastern, join me on Stirring the Cauldron Live. And then at 10 p.m., stick around for New Aeon Now with Lily Alley, Davron Michaels, and Christine Matza. Finally, to round out the night, join Dr. Kelly Renee Schutz on the Paranormal Encounters podcast. All this every Thursday, right here on Para-X.
Have you ever wondered what Jesus and his followers would say if you could receive their messages today? In his new book, Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits, channeler and author Barry Strohm answers those questions for you. Using his gift of spirit communication, he brings you messages from such Holy Spirits as Moses, John the Baptist, Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Jesus, and even Mother Teresa and the Reverend Billy Graham. They discuss topics that are important for contemporary life in these troubled times. Spirits Speak, Channeling Jesus and the Holy Spirits is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other booksellers. Signed copies are available on the author's website, spiritspredict.com. After reading this book, you will never again say, "What would Jesus say or do?" Welcome back to Channeling History. Now, here are your hosts, Barry and Connie Strohm.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. Connie, let's do some more questions.
Okay, Fred, what is the significance of the number 143?
The number 143 is very, very interesting. It stands for I love you. If you look at the number of letters in the term I love you, I is 1, love has 4 letters, and you has 3. So you get the number 143, and it means I love you.
Okay, why did you decide to leave the Mr. Rogers Neighborhood Show?
We had been doing it for many, many, many years. I was having trouble coming up with new concepts. I wasn't feeling well, and I was getting older. I just thought that I had done as much at this time that I could do with Mr. Rogers. I wanted to try to work with adults. I wanted to see if I could bring some of my thoughts to adults and have them respond as children had. I will tell you that I was very disappointed. Adults are very, very difficult to have change your minds. That is why children are so important. Their minds are still like sieves. By the time you become an adult, you get fixated on different opinions, and you find that there is very little that will sway you or change your mind. Sadly, many people, by the time they're adults, have been taken over by greed. They want money, they want wealth, they want all of the things that children basically don't want. It was so much easier to talk with children, and what a disappointment when I tried to give my words and understandings to the adults.
To what do you attribute the success of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood?
I think the success can be attributed to the fact that we were a pioneer in what we were doing. There were many parents out there that wanted their children to hear the good word. They did not want them to watch the cartoons that showed the violence. I mean, children were emulating what was going on in the movies. There was a 4-year-old girl that put a towel around her neck and jumped off a roof because she thought she could fly like Superman. I wanted to provide an environment that was safe for the children and was safe for the parents. We were the first. Television was new. I think it would be much more difficult today with the culture that seems to have taken over our world.
Do you think it's possible in today's culture?
I think it's possible, but I think it's improbable.
Why do you think that you did not relate to adults like you did with children?
Because by the time you obtain adulthood, you have pretty much made up your mind. You know what you want in life. You know what you're willing to do to try to obtain that in life. Adults have got very preconceived ideas using their free will. That is why it is difficult for us to spread the word of God among adults. Many have their minds made up, and it's very difficult to change the mind of many adults.
What do children need in their development?
They need to understand love. They need to know that people care for them. And they need to know that people beyond their family unit care for them. They need to know that fairness is important. They need to know that there are ways that they can find happiness. They need to know that there are adults that will help them.
Okay, we have another question out of the chat room. Today's children are being given sex-changing hormones. What are your thoughts on that?
I think that it is terrible to alter the natural growth of a child. God provided a process for the child to learn, to grow, to understand, to realize what is good and what is bad. Young children are not capable of making decisions that should affect the rest of their lives. They needed to be guided, they need to be loved, and they need to be supported. If they are different in their sexual orientation, then that should be allowed to mature, and they need to make their own decisions about the lifestyle that they want to follow. There's nothing wrong with alternative lifestyles. Today, the culture is advancing and accepting alternate lifestyles and sexualities. But I strongly feel that the child should be left to make its own decision without having any type of life-altering medications that will affect the rest of their lives.
What was your opinion towards individuals that were gay?
I love people that were gay as much as I love people that were straight. I love people that were black as much as I love people that were white. My message was to love everyone. I didn't have any conditions to that love. God didn't have conditions to his love. Why should you have any?
One of your quotes is, "Try your best to make goodness attractive." How do you recommend that we accomplish that feat?
In today's world, that is very, very difficult. I think that you could use modern technologies to give stories of right and wrong. I think if you simply invite children to sit down and listen to stories that are showing love and compassion, then that child has a chance to make his own decisions to follow that type of life. Today, many of the shows on television and in the movies are counterculture. Many of the musical songs that you listen to today are full of vulgarities, are full of hatreds. I think that there is much that you can do. I think that most of the things just simply come down to common sense and how you want that child to grow up and who you want that child to be. I believe that many of the things that I taught are the same things that should be taught today. Think about how you can modernize my teachings, how you can adapt many of the things that I told the children to today's world. I think if you do that, that goodness can be spread among the children, and the children are the foundation for tomorrow.
So how would you recommend that we teach the adults to be kind to each other?
That is an incredibly difficult situation. Adults have to understand that it is only through kindness to each other that they can assure that evolution will not come to an end. Adults have got to learn that if they show kindness, if they show love to others, then their lives are going to be much happier. Simply bringing the message of God to as many people as possible. A percentage of them will listen and a percentage of them will change, and hopefully that percentage will change others. In today's world, it's a very, very difficult task.
You influenced many children throughout the years. These children are becoming the leaders today with mixed results and much hatred. Do you think it would be even worse without your show?
It may be a vain thing for me to say, but yes, I know that we influenced thousands or perhaps even millions of children. How much of what I said stuck with them is hard to tell. I know that there are people out there who learned the messages that I spoke, had the messages reinforced with their parents, and went on to gain good educations and go on to help others. I see many wealthy people out there doing so much good for others. I also see many that could care less. All they want are their yachts and their money. I would like to think that some of those people out there that are doing good listen to my show and that my messages meant something to them.
You said what is important in life is invisible to the eye. Would you please explain that to us?
Faith. Faith and love. You cannot see faith and you cannot see love. But if you let faith and love guide your life, you're going to be an extremely happy person. Oh, you'll have grief and you'll have times of sorrow. But all in all, you will find that faith and love is the path to the light. If you follow greed and hatred, anger, you're following a path to darkness.
How is it possible to make goodness attractive in this modern world?
Goodness has to be packaged in a modern fashion. Goodness is the result of love and faith. If you can drive home the basic messages, the words I spoke or the words that God still speaks, the messages of love and faith, then all will be well for the future generations.
Would you tell us about the interview with Kodo the gorilla?
That was a truly amazing thing. My friends thought that the gorilla was a very special animal and that it would be possible to have him on the show. I think the gorilla fell in love with me. It is proof that the souls of animals can feel love as well as the souls of humans. I think that I always had a very strong energy about me of love. That animal sensed that energy. That animal returned it. It was a very interesting interview. I don't think he ever wanted me to leave, but Coco was truly a special animal.
Yes, he was. I watched that episode the other day, and he was amazing. What did you mean when you said you are special?
I want every child to believe that they are special. I want them to believe that they have a oneness with God. That oneness is different from any other child's oneness. While they are all similar as children of God, each individual has unique characteristics, unique problems, unique ways of thinking about things. I wanted each child to love themselves. Now, that's not to say that I did not want them to study, to advance. I wanted them to have the self-confidence that they needed to face the problems of growing up and to face the problems of violence, of greed, of all the things that they were going to encounter as adults. The first step, I felt, to a child's building a strong foundation was to love themselves.
A criticism of your work is that you created a generation of children believing they were special and became narcissistic. What would you say to your critics?
I'm not saying that there may have perhaps been some children that misunderstood what my message was and grew up to be quite narcissistic. I could actually name a few of them, but I'm not going to. You have to look at how my work affected the many. Many children believed they were special, and that belief built a strong foundation for them. There are many people out there that are doing good. Now, the ones that are doing bad get much more publicity, and they're the ones that you hear about. But there's many good people out there. There'll be a time that good will truly conquer evil. It's just that the good are the silent minority.
Yes. What role did music play in your life?
I loved music. I was fairly good at it. I felt that songs could be a great learning tool for children. I wrote many songs for the children throughout my career, and I would sing them myself. I think that music can guide children, can relax them, it can help them. Music can also be a terrible guide for them. As I said before, if you listen to the sound of violence and vulgarity in the music of today, then you're going to think that that's okay. There's much music of faith. There's much music that children can enjoy and learn from.
What effect did 9/11 have on you?
It was devastating. I could not believe that individuals could create that extent of violence and hatred upon our people. I tried to explain as best I could something that I couldn't explain. I thought that 9/11 was the epitome of going against the Word of God, going against faith, and going against love. It was a terrible time in our history. Hopefully, it is not something that will be repeated in the future.
What did you mean by the term dying well?
I meant that you should have an understanding with God. You needed to know that passing was not something that was the end. You needed to know that that dying, or the act of passing from your human body, was a natural thing. It was something God planned because He wanted you to come home. He wanted you to be able to return again, and He wanted you to learn. Dying well meant being at peace when you took your last breath.
Okay, one of our listeners would like to know, when you were passing, you mentioned something about a sheep. Were you a sheep or a goat, and what did that mean?
In the Bible, it talks about that God will separate the sheep from the goats. I felt very comfortable with my life, but the last thing, my final words were, I hope that I will be a sheep and not a goat. Well, when I got over here, I found out that I truly was a sheep. I was well judged. I was astonished that our Lord was there to greet me when I returned. I want people to understand that if they truly do live a life of good and they try to follow the commands of God, that they will all be the sheep. Don't be a goat. Help others, show love, and be a sheep when you return.
Okay, what is your opinion of social media?
Social media, I think, is what television was in the early days. In the early days, there was much violence on television, and there's much violence and bad stuff on social media. I think that social media has to determine the path that it wants to take. It can be good, or it can be terrible.
Okay, what did you think about the movie A Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood starring Tom Hanks?
I thought Tom was a wonderful individual. I think that the movie was excellent. Many of the movies that are taken today have got very little power or truth to them. I think Tom did an incredible job of speaking my words and of getting my messages through.
Okay, Fred, it's been absolutely wonderful having you here. You are a beautiful soul. Do you have a final message for us?
Yes. I hope that those of you listening will understand the value of laying a strong foundation for our children. Our children will be the leaders of tomorrow. You must instill an understanding of the light of God, of his teachings. You have to show them to love your neighbor. They should accept anyone to live in their neighborhood. There should be no exclusions. God wants all people to get along. It is the responsibility of the adults today to show the children what they need to understand in order to get along in this difficult world. If they do that, the future of humanity will be assured. If they don't do it, then evolution is going to have major problems. They have to understand truly that violence and greed is not the answer. They have to show love towards others. They have to have faith. And they have to be good neighbors. So thank you for allowing me to come through tonight. I really enjoyed it. I hope that I didn't disappoint you. I tried not to disappoint the children through the years, and I hope I didn't disappoint you tonight. So goodbye, and thank you for listening to me. Maybe I've finally been able to reach some adults. Goodbye.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate your coming.
Okay. Thank you. That was very strong. His energy is something else. Next week, we're going to be very, very interesting. We are going to channel the spirits of Anthony Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Two people that could not have been more politically apart, but were great friends. I think that this is a great opportunity to understand how people with great differences can get along. They managed to do it, and I hope they can explain it to everyone else. I think it'll be a wonderful show. Submit questions or suggestions for future guests through our email, channelinghistoryon@parax@gmail.com. My 8th book, Messages of God for a Modern World, should be available for sale on October 15th or thereabouts. Contains 61 messages of God that we have channeled ourselves. Please tell your friends about it. The one thing that he continuously asks is that people help spread his words, and this book is truly all of his words. It's going to be available in softcover and Kindle for immediate download. Signed copies of all my books are available on our website, spiritspredict.com, or wordsofgodthenandnow.com. So, I hope you enjoyed the show tonight. I know I enjoyed it. I really didn't know that much about Mr. Rogers until I started to do a little research, and we had multiple conversations before the show. He is an incredible soul, and I hope that the goodness that he shows rub off on you. So thank you for listening. Please join us Sundays at 9 p.m. Eastern Time on the PowerX Radio Network.
And I would also like to thank all of you for listening and joining us this evening. Have yourselves a wonderful week, and God bless you all.
Thanks for listening to Channeling History. Tune in again next week for another electrifying episode, as we never know who will make an appearance or who will come through the portal. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2020. Our Story Begins by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.